Hello, everyone, and welcome to Conversations with Kate. And thank you for tuning in tonight, choosing us over the vice presidential debate. We'll try to make it worth your while. And I know we will, because I have some really fantastic guests tonight, namely the co-deans of our cathedral. And so welcome Mark Kowalewski and Dan, I'm forgetting how to pronounce your last name, Aid?
Aid.
Okay, good. Welcome to you both. I'm so happy that you're with us tonight.
Thank you. We're very happy to be here.
Yes, indeed.
Great. And I have so many different kinds of things I want to talk to you about. I want to know about you as individuals. I want to know what deans do and what it's like to be co-deans. I want to talk about that beautiful jewel of a cathedral of ours and sort of significant aspects of that beautiful space. I want to hear about your ideas for the future. So there's lots to talk about, lots of different ways in. But I think I'll just ask a first kind of question, which is, are you native Angelenos? And if not, where are you from? And how did you find your way to LA? And Dan, let's start with you.
Sure. I'm a New Yorker. Grew up in the school in New York City, and so Long Island and New York City, and then went to General Seminary. I worked at St. Thomas, and then went at St. Luke's, and then Mark and I met at a conference in Santa Barbara, and we became friends, and went to another conference and got to know each other more, and then it was a beautiful January in Santa Barbara, and I came back to New York, and I was walking the dogs at 5 a.m. in a blizzard, and said, "Why am I living in New York City?"
I think all of us East Coasters have had that moment, usually in a blizzard, when we say
Exactly.
That's enough.
Exactly. And
so,
then, and he asked me to apply for some jobs here in LA, and my husband and I came out to LA.
Amazing. And Mark, what about you? I think you might also be a New Yorker.
Well, I'm from Buffalo, New York, originally, on our other side of New York State, Western New York, on Lake Erie, which has even far colder weather than New York City does, lake effect snow. So I was glad to get out of Buffalo as soon as I can.
Did you also have a dog walking in a blizzard moment?
No. Actually, I had been out here for a little while before I actually moved out here. I had come to California and knew what it was like, and then a friend of mine was moving out to California, and at that time I had just finished college and I was applying to graduate schools, and decided, well, I can do that in warm weather as well as in freezing cold weather. So I moved out with a friend of mine, and then just stayed. I never left. I went to graduate school at USC, so I didn't have to leave Southern California.
So you've really been here, Mark, your whole adult life.
Oh, pretty much, yeah. Just pretty much right after college, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Whereas Dan, it sounds like maybe you came a little bit later because you've been working at all these other churches in New York first.
2003, I came.
Mm-hmm. Oh, okay. So it's been a while.
Yeah, it's been a while.
Yeah. I remember arriving in California and just thinking, how long has this been going on? And why didn't anyone tell me that you could live in such comfort? So you were both, no, wait, let me see if I got this right. So Mark, you were here, you were doing various kinds of work. And then did you become the rector of St. John's first, or did you guys enter that job at the same time?
Well, I had been on the staff of on the diocesan staff with Bishop Bruno. And my job was what we called in those days, part of my job was what we called as deployment officer, which is what's now called transition officer in the church. And so I went, I went around to a lot of different churches that were in the search process. And one of the churches I had to help out was St. John's. And subsequently, they said, would you like to come to be the rector? Because we really liked you when you were here, et cetera, et cetera. And so, in 2006, I came to be what was called the priest in charge under special circumstances. But that was in January. And then Dan was he was the rector of Pomona and really had turned a church that was almost dead around while he was there. And so, I think we could really use your skills at St. John's. And so Dan came on Pentecost of that same year, like in May, right? I guess it was. And then I became the rector first. And then when we became the Cathedral, we decided that we were going to move to a model of deanship, right? So, and so that took about a period of about 2 years?
2 full years.
To process that and make that happen before.
Because it's pretty innovative, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. We had 2 priest mentors who ran St. Gregory of Nyssa in San Francisco. And we sort of watched those 2 men really create something and sustain it and be innovative and work the best that they could together with very different skills and have it be greater than the whole. We're driven by their work, and we said, Mark worked with me at St. Paul's on many Sundays, and so it was really a team effort there as well. And so we knew each other very well, I would say, before I came to John's. And so I'm the only person who's ever moved from Greenwich Village to Pomona. I wanted to be in a more urban setting, and St. John's is a much more urban setting than sort of.
It's as urban as you could get, right?
It couldn't be more urban.
I know Pomona must have been quite a contrast to New York City. So, but I love the idea that you had mentors, and it sounds like watching these 2 mentors of yours co-serve in San Francisco was really an inspiration, because you could see them harmonize in the work. And I think I'm also understanding you to say that it wasn't an automatic thing that you could just say to the powers that be, this is how we want to do it, but that you had to sort of make a case for why it's a great idea.
Right.
And I also think that, I think that a lot of people just are hierarchical in their thinking, and it's threatening sometimes to imagine a leadership that's shared. But my hat's off to you, because I think it's wonderful. I think it's absolutely wonderful to model partnership instead of top down bureaucracy.
Well, that's why even with our wardens, obviously in the canonical structure of the church, you have to have a senior warden and a junior warden. But we tend to just refer to them as the wardens, and they work also as a team.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's amazing. And they don't have to look far for an example. I've always thought it would be better to have co-senior wardens, because the senior warden job is too hard. It just takes so. I mean, we have fabulous ones, and it takes over their lives. So to really have a partner in that would be amazing. I like the way you think, and so you are co-deans now. You said you knew each other pretty well by the time you started to work together, and so do you have your departments that you're in charge of, or is it completely stirred together?
Well, it's both and. I don't think there's always a sort of an A person on something and then the B person, but neither one of us could ever say, oh, I don't know anything about that. You have to talk to the other one. So someone, Mark is, for instance, he's an extraordinarily gifted teacher, and he does most of the teaching. I could do that, but I would never be as good as Mark is at it. And I'm sort of the creative liturgy person, among other things. And Mark is among many other things other than teaching. So it's a balance of interests and skills. And then sometimes after you do something for 2 or 3 years, you say, well, I'd like to get out of that for a while, and you hand it back off to somebody else.
You know, this is just sounding so good. Where's my co-rector? No, I mean, it's so good because the work is collaborative all the time.
Right.
With our lay partners. So
in so many different fields, people work as partners. In the church, it's very exotic, but in normal life, people are partners. They work in business partners together. They work on all kinds of things together.
Yeah.
You know, the Episcopal Church doesn't, I mean, although there are places that have co-rectors, right? It's not really, that there's no sort of like standardized model for it. But the Presbyterians, for example, actually have a whole process for becoming co-pastors of a congregation.
Very interesting. So there's a precedent there. Yeah. Well, I think it's great. And that my favorite thing about what you've said so far is that idea that, you know, just because you're really good at something doesn't mean that you want to do it 24/7, right? And so that even though you love liturgy, maybe sometimes, Dan, it's fun to step away and be in a different place. And yeah, so I think it's so healthy and such a model for lay members of the church, so that they can see that their ministries are not life sentences, but also things that we can keep handing off to each other. And why don't you try this for a while? And why don't I step away? Even though I'm a really good cook, why don't I get out of the kitchen and start to, you know, do something else in the church? Yeah, I think it seems very wise. And next, I think I want to ask you the story about our cathedral. All right, now I'm not originally from here, but as I understand it, there was a cathedral, and it was St. Paul's, right? And it was downtown. But then, what's the story? What happened to that cathedral? They had to take it down to build a skyscraper or something like that?
It was, well, if you go today to the corner of Wilshire and Figueroa, on the northwest corner where Price Waterhouse building is today, that's where the old cathedral stood. And if you go into the lobby, there's actually photos, I believe, from of the old cathedral that stood on that site. And it was called St. Paul's, and there was earthquake damage in the late 70s, I think it was, which required that it be torn down. So since that time, there wasn't really a cathedral per se in Los Angeles. In 1994, the Cathedral Center of St. Paul was dedicated, but that was never really, a cathedral per se. It was the St. Athanasius congregation met in the Cathedral Center Chapel, that church that was there, and the bishop's cathedral or chair was there, and that sort of thing. But there was never a space that served as a cathedral. And so it wasn't until Bishop Bruno decided that, along with our vestry, that he was going to make us what's called the pro-cathedral. That is a church that served as a cathedral in 2008. And it was dedicated formally as that in 2008, that we took on the cathedral ministry. And it wasn't
Did you know back then, when you took on the pro-cathedral ministry, that someday you would be the fully fledged cathedral?
Well, I mean, it wasn't really clear.
No,
I think that was I think that the title of pro-cathedral was always sort of unclear. And so when Bishop Taylor came on, one of the first things he did was to clarify that. And so we simply became the cathedral of the Diocese of Los Angeles at that time.
and a beautiful cathedral too. And I'm assuming that most people who are watching this have seen St. John's Cathedral, but maybe not. In fact, I noticed that Carl Edwards is in the chat, and he's fairly new to the Episcopal tradition, and he's just saying ministries as life sentences. OMG, what a powerful image for a way too common reality. But not at the cathedral. I'm wondering, Justin, if you could put up the first image, just so that anybody who doesn't know about this beautiful building can see. There it is. And can you tell us about what the architectural style is?
Well, it's Romanesque would be the one-word answer. And it's we're on the National Historic Register because it's one of the best examples of church Romanesque in the United States. We're on also the California Historic Landmarks and a Los Angeles landmark. Dan, do you want to say something about, you were in Italy and saw
there's about an hour outside of Rome, there is a village that has a 9th century basilica in it that I guess this basilica got into the sort of English architectural books at one point, and the architects of St. John saw it and modeled the outside of St. John's on that building. And I was fortunate enough to actually go there, and it looks exactly like St. John's on the outside. Very, very similar.
Oh my gosh. That must have been such a strange experience for you.
Yeah. It doesn't have an outdoor pulpit, but everything else is the same. And I don't have any Italian. I was trying to talk to the people in the building. And so I pulled up a picture of St. John's in Los Angeles, and I showed it to them, and they were like, oh, I was like, oh, you don't know your sister across in America.
Oh my gosh. What year was this building built?
1924.
Yeah.
Consecrated in 25.
25, right.
But built in 24.
Yeah. And what was the neighborhood like back in 1924? Do you know anything about what community was it serving? Was it a neighborhood church back then, even more than it might be now, or what?
Well, I mean, that neighborhood was the Beverly Hills of Los Angeles before there was a Beverly Hills. It was an extraordinarily wealthy. And St. John's was the largest church west of the Mississippi. And it was sort of a society parish, I guess.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Wow. I didn't know that. In fact, I think of it, I mean, it's so gorgeous, it's so elegant, but it feels very urban, and the neighborhood, I mean, you're sort of next to a gas station, and across the street from a strip mall, it's not.
That's our gas station. We're very happy to have it, actually.
Okay. Yes. No, I know. It's great that you have a gas station. Actually, I'll ask about that a little later. But
if you were to go to Mount St. Mary's College or University, just down the block, next to St. Vincent's Church, which is across the catty corner from us, you would see exactly what the neighborhood looked like from about the 1890s through the 30s. It's a pristine set of houses that was it was the first gated community of the city of Los Angeles in the 1890s, and it was that neighborhood was actually really the suburbs in some sense of Los Angeles in that time. And the Doheny family bought all the houses on that gated community, and they maintained them as they were at that time. And so now they belong to the college, but if you ever go there, you can see the Doheny mansion.
That's a great idea. I'm going to do that just to get that sort of walk back in time. So I'm wondering, Justin, if you could show us the second photo of of the interior, and I think it has a little bit of your extraordinary ceiling. So can you tell us a little bit about the interior? I think this is one of the most beautiful church interiors I've ever seen. So walk us through what we're looking at here.
Well, you're looking at the high altar, and when St. John's opened in 1925, none of that mosaic work was there. There were pictures. It was just poured concrete. And
really?
So,
oh wow!
So it's an icon of patience. What you're seeing is really the last bit of mosaic work was done in the late 1960s.
Yeah,
I guess. I met a woman who grew up at St. John's, and she tells a story that the dome, the sort of sunburst in the dome, was laid out in the parish hall to sort of get an idea of what the artisans were working on it. And as a child, she ran across it with her dog, scattering all the tiles. So that was a great sort of for a living memory.
Fabulous. But, wow. And so
now,
much gold. So much gold. Mm-hmm.
But the whole church, I guess, at one point was supposed to be all those mosaics, but it didn't happen.
Yeah, mosaic or marble faced, and it almost would have been too much, maybe. I think
for modern people, maybe too much.
Yeah,
yeah. But it's so pretty. It's just like being inside of a jewel box.
Right.
And there's a side chapel. I don't have a photograph of it, but there's a side chapel that's made all of gold tile, right?
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So beautiful. Is that newer?
1968.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, listeners, if you haven't had a chance to visit St. John's Cathedral before, I suppose we'll have to wait till after the pandemic. I don't think you're giving tours right now, are you? But it's so worth seeing. Do you remember what you thought when you first walked into that space, Mark?
I had seen it several years before. I had been there for some other event, and then had gone there when I was on the diocesan staff. But yeah, I mean, it clearly is just an amazing space, and we, I think, sometimes take it for granted.
Take it for granted,
you know, that but every time someone new comes, we realize how they just are taken by the beauty of it.
Yes, and I think you have a lot of weddings there, right?
Yes, we do.
So it's also a very photogenic and popular destination for weddings. It's just so pretty. It's so pretty, you know, for photographs. And
it's also there's lots of, we've had, not this year because of the pandemic, but lots of filming there, and it's amazing how, you know, Hollywood can just turn that building into sort of, you know,
all kinds of
things, like sort of a Renaissance banquet hall. And I mean, it's amazing. We have all kinds of filming there, where they use the basics and they switch it around.
Yeah, that is amazing. And I wonder if you could put up photograph number 4, Justin. Now this, I think, speaking of weddings, I think this is actually the interior of the church for a wedding banquet, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Now, I noticed there are no pews. Can you tell us a little bit about that you're able to actually use your space for lots of different kinds of events? What's the story behind that?
Well, it was a process of about 2 years or more, actually.
Right. Well, the first go around was at my church in Pomona.
Right, because you got rid of the pews there too.
And so we learned what the process would be and how difficult it is. And
the people in Pomona were not on board immediately.
Oh no, no. People have really deep attachment to pews, and what I learned in Pomona is that you have to let people experience it in a safety place where you say we're going to take them all out and we're going to experience it, and then they're all going to come back if you don't like it. That is the way for people to get used to this. And at St. John's, we took them all out. We had a whole Holy Week where every service was in a different configuration, and then we put them back. And then the next Holy Week, we took them all out, and we said, now, last year you experienced this as new. And so you're not going to experience the newness anymore. You're going to experience what it is and the benefits of what it is. And people got it. People really, really got it. And there's some real, questions for people like, well, can I snuggle up with somebody if we're two chairs? Where's my little boy going to sit next to me? I have a PhD now in where women will and will not put their purse. That was a huge issue. Huge issue.
It's not. No kidding. You can't put your purse on the ground.
It was a big conversation.
Right, it was.
Where am I going to do this?
Yeah.
Where will the prayer books go? Where will the welcome cards go?
Right.
What happens if someone doesn't like it? And so, what we did is we actually took some of the pews and had them totally restored and put them in the transept. And so those we call them the Pastoral Pews. And people who are really dedicated to sitting in their pew get to sit in a pew, and it's all good. And now mostly people don't sit in the pastoral pews anymore because they've gotten used to it.
Right.
So it's just allowed us to do lots of different things.
Well, the other thing too is that it also took a lot of education.
Right.
The other piece was that most people don't know that pews are a relatively new innovation in the history of the church. They only started life in the Reformation. And the only reason that they started life in the Reformation is because the Reformation said, sit still and listen from on high to what I'm going to tell you. And you sit in your place and be told what I'm going to tell you in the sermon. The sacramental life of the church before the Reformation was all about the beauty of liturgy and movement, and various things could go on in a church at the same time, in the same way Orthodoxy still has that.
Yes. Yes.
And so if you go to many places in Europe, they don't have pews. Right? They'll have chairs, but they don't have pews, nor had they ever had them. Right. So it wasn't as if you go to a cathedral in England and someone tore the pews out. Well, they never had pews.
Yeah.
Now, in New England, where I served before I came here, pews are so sacrosanct. And I know in my old church, when someone died, the family would buy a pew and and there'd be a gold, plaque on it. There were plaques everywhere. And I know that in other churches I visited in New England, there were actually family boxes, so you had your own like a compartment in the church, in Old North Church and places like that. And it's it's not very friendly.
Right.
The pew system. It's hard to sort of get at each other. Maybe that was the idea way back when, but I love what you've done, because the way I understand, the way I've experienced it, I've attended a service at your church, and then there's something on the lawn, like drinks or something, and then we come back in, and the space is turned into a banquet hall, and then there's a dinner, and I know you do weddings in the same sort of sequence, right? So that it really is multi-use, and I suppose the same could be true for concerts.
Yes.
Oh, yes.
And theatrical experiences. Sure.
Yeah. So your church becomes a hub of an endless variety of ways for humans to gather and celebrate. And also when you talk about Holy Week, I immediately think about how in Holy Week, services can be, sometimes they can be small, sometimes they're intimate, and it would be lovely to be able to sort of be in smaller spaces or creative spaces together. I just think it's wonderful what you've done, and it's especially because you're a cathedral. So we, as a diocese, need you in a lot of different ways for a lot of different things.
Well, for example, in Holy Week, what we can do with the space for that is on Wednesday we have a tenebrae service, which, as you suggest, is smaller, and we can configure the space, the middle of the space for that. But then on Maundy Thursday, we do a banquet right in the middle of the church, and so there's banquet hall or banquet seating all the way down the nave. And then Good Friday is yet another configuration.
I think the conversion experience people have is that they realize that on a regular basis, you can have both, very traditional, but in another setting of chairs, if for worship, you can actually look at people while you're worshiping, and you're sort of gathered in a way that you're not just staring at the back of somebody's head. And congregational singing is better, I think, in the route at times. And so the experience of being together, looking at each other, praying together, is totally freeing. And then, if you want a wedding with utterly traditional setup where the bride walks down the aisle, you can have that too. Right. It's a both and.
It's a both and. Endless opportunities. It does strike me, and I'm a very optimistic person, and yet sometimes I hear people say, the church has to change. It has to keep pace with the way that the world is changing. But then I also hear the same people say, but don't change anything. And even the tiny change can seem monumental. So I just love that story of how you knew that it would take a long time, and you trusted people to use the time to accustom themselves, and then if they had said absolutely no, then you wouldn't have done it, right?
Right.
Yeah. So anyway, that's great. I think that's a great what?
They had to experience it and not just think about it. Yeah. Right.
Because change theoretically always feels like loss.
Exactly.
Until you find out, until you have that, like you were describing, the new experience that's then not new anymore. Then when you can experience what that feels like. So very, very interesting. Tell us, what are some of the things that happen at a cathedral? What are some of the diocesan things that you need to do? How much of your time do you feel like you spend being your people's church versus being the church for all of us? And what is a cathedral?
Do you want to start?
Yeah, well, first of all, the low-hanging fruit there is, what is a cathedral, right? A cathedral comes from the Latin word cathedra, which just means chair, right? And it's where the chair of the bishop is. And we have at St. John's, since Bishop Taylor has been the bishop, we actually had the cathedra of the diocese has actually moved now to St. John's. And so that historic cathedra from Old St. Paul's is now at St. John's, and the suffragan's chair as well, Bishop currently occupied by Bishop Diane. And so both of those chairs are at the cathedral, making it officially the cathedral. And so it is the official church of the Bishop of Los Angeles, right? So we always list him in our bulletins, the clergy of St. John's Cathedral. John Harvey Taylor, Bishop of Los Angeles, is the first name, and then our names after that. So it's the bishop's primary seat in his diocese.
So I think here's a real world example. Bishop John wanted to have something, some worship service for people in this time of great anxiety right before the election. And so, we're going to be meeting with him and Ken and Melissa and Susan Russell, some other people. And he said, we want this to be for everybody in the diocese. And so that's like a real world example of, well, we'll host it, but the bishop is going to put it together. Well, him and his staff will put it together. But he wants the life of the diocese to have sort of a one of many focal points. And St. John is a focal point, and for him, that's where he wants to do liturgy and extend his teaching from a physical place.
So one of the ministries of any cathedral, and ours, as an example, is one of hospitality. I think that's what Dan says. Right. I mean, it's that you open your doors to a broader circle of folks than you would in a parish church, and allow the bishop to be there, and give the bishop the space to be the bishop in his or her cathedral. Right.
The space to be the bishop. So those years when you were the pro-cathedral, that wasn't part of it in the same way, I guess.
Yeah, it was somewhat. I think it was both, which was kind of difficult.
Awkward period.
Yeah. I mean, we would host many things for the diocese, like all the ordinations, for example, of deacons and priests would be at St. John's, and then other large state occasion kinds of services. But being a cathedral, I think, is more than that, and we're just now, I think, being able to grow into what that means. What's the significance in our city and diocese right now?
Yeah, I mean, when I was serving in New England, my church was in the hinterland. It was almost in Rhode Island, but our cathedral was in Boston. So it was a good hour and 20-minute drive to get to the cathedral. And so people in my church, in this small town, they didn't experience it as their cathedral. They would talk about the diocese like it was somebody else's diocese, and that they just thought of themselves as a church. And that always made me sad. And I remember at one point, our bishop decided that all the confirmations would happen at the cathedral instead of in deaneries. And there was just a revolt among grandparents, and people said, I don't think I should have to go all the way. And it always made me so sad, because I think that if we have a cathedral, if we have a place that all of us can gather for these really life-changing moments, that's important, If I wanted my parishioners to feel like it was their cathedral, as much as it was somebody in Cambridge or somebody closer to Boston. And I don't think they particularly did, but I admired how in my final years in Massachusetts, the cathedral did a renovation. They took out the pews, they put in chairs, they created an embedded tile labyrinth in the main floor, and they took their chapel and created all the walls of the chapel as sort of glass or lucite or something. It's right up next to the street, so that everybody could walk. But the church was just like a glass-walled church, the little chapel was. And so there were all these ways that people were being, and the most beautiful thing that this cathedral did, you might have heard this story, on Fridays, the Muslim community needed a place for prayer. And so they were using the space. And in the renovation, they built, the cathedral architects built a long row of a foot washing area for the Muslim guests. So that hospitality, that sense of, all are welcome here, even people of other faiths, we want you to be able to worship here, properly. And anyway, I feel like that cathedral really came into its own, in a beautiful way. And the other thing that happened was the homeless community that was all around there, they'd always hung out on the steps, but at that key turning point, they were sort of invited to become auxiliary staff, and they were hosting a lot of the events, and ushering, and it was beautiful.
Mm.
So I love this idea of a cathedral being holding a message. For instance, over the front of your church, the gun control message.
Right.
That's bold.
Yeah,
we would have much better reviews on Yelp if that wasn't there.
Well, it isn't there now.
It is in there now.
We've taken it down because it got a little bit shop worn.
Well, and we thought that we had done that. We wanted to do something else, and we're not committed to gun violence, but we wanted to express that in different ways, and it becomes sort of wallpaper.
Yeah.
I think being the cathedral. Well, two things. I think St. John's has a long, long history of being sort of out in front on issues of social justice. Mm-hmm. People are very comfortable with that. So to do that kind of work, people were like, we're all in. We got that. And so for St. John's to when the Guibord Center was at St. John's, Mother Gwen would bring all kinds of people through. Right. We had an Easter day where the first 3 pews were filled with rabbis. Right. We had a Christmas Eve where the first 5 pews were filled with people Muslims from the Islamic Center. Right. And people at St. John's, it's a vocational issue. They're like, oh, this is terrific. Yeah. And the people at St. John's work very hard at welcoming the diocese when we do the events like that, and it's not like, well, who are these people coming here? They know, well, this is our it's not about me and Mark, it's about our ministry together for the diocese, and they like being the cathedral and like welcoming people, and liked having you all to dinner. So
yes, we came for dinner. You invited us to share a service. Was it Ascension?
Yes. And then we came to you.
Then we came to you on
I know. Yeah, I love it. Let's keep doing that. I love it. You did such a great job again with the entertaining, because we had the service and then we just walked to the entrance area where you have a sort of a dinner setup, and so it's again that flow that's really nice. And we loved hosting you. We absolutely loved it. So your people who attend St. John's every weekend, do they attend St. John's Church, or do they feel that they are parishioners of the cathedral?
I think they are members of that. They are primarily the parish church, right? Yeah. And I think the cathedral ministry is something that we do, and they understand that and embrace that. But primarily, it's a congregation, right? Right. Week in and week out, it's a parish church. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So it's another one of those both ands. I love all the both ands in your ministry. And I think you have, we talked about the gas station next door earlier, and you said it's our gas station. So tell us about the gas station next door to your church.
Well,
it's been there since what, the 1950s?
Yeah, I think so. We're not quite sure when it actually started as a gas station, but it's been there for a while,
a long while.
And then it was, I think, the lease was renewed at some point or whatever. But yeah, so we own the entire block. The congregation owns the entire block, and so the gas station piece of it has been a real help.
Especially these days,
income. Right.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So they pay you rent, and that's part of what keeps the cathedral going strong, right?
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. And but you have a dream of a housing project there, don't you?
Right. We are in conversations right now about having of getting rid of the gas station and having a housing project on the Figueroa side and retail, and mostly market rate, although there would be some affordable in there. But then on the opposite side, on the flower side, we're hoping that we might be able to have affordable senior housing, and we're
such a need
of thinking about all of that right now.
And to have the whole block as sort of one organic sort of development and not just lots of little pieces. And so the whole place would be used to its fullest potential and once again, to not close it off, but to open it up to the larger community. There might be things in the retail we could do. The senior citizens housing will be there. It's an interesting proposition, and it will help us move into the next century.
Right. Yeah, and if it all comes together, it would really provide. It would obviously be more beautiful space for the community because it and we would not have a gas station there,
and a more functional space.
Yeah. And then
be sure to build lots of underground parking so that we can all easily.
Right. Exactly.
Well,
parking is a big deal.
Yeah, big deal.
The other thing though is that it would, if it all goes through, it would ensure a strong economic stream for St. John's for another century at least. Right.
And I think that churches need that. They need that kind of security, so that then gives us the freedom to try new things and to experiment because we've got that sort of foundation.
Right.
And also a mission field for you, especially the elder housing idea. So what when you think about the future of our cathedral, and I always call it our cathedral because I want everyone to celebrate this gift that we have of this amazing place. I know that music is a big part of one of your great charisms. Can you say a little bit about your music program? And I think we're like cousins because we have some overlap in our choirs, don't we?
We do. We a lot of times we think we have the same choir because they all sing.
Then you're very lucky. You're very lucky.
What I learned, if you think priests work very hard, it's nothing compared to people who are singers in the church, because they have like 10, 12 gigs. They're going to morning service here, the afternoon service there. They'll go sing a concert and then come back for even. So, I mean, they work really, really hard, and they bring the worship of the church alive in a way that the average person can't. And their ministry is such a gift. And it's so hard now in this period. It's so hard for people who, it's economically hard, but I think it hurts people's soul because they can't offer their gift.
I know. This is my gift here, by the way. This is my new dog, Morty.
Hi,
Morty.
Mordecai. Yeah, I know. I worry about all the creative people here in Los Angeles. It's so hard to not be able to have all those avenues of expression that are just part of who they are. So you have an evensong once a month.
Yeah, we
that's on hold now.
That's on hold now, clearly, right?
Right,
because,
right. I mean, we're talking, after the pause.
Compline. We'll have that twice a month.
Yeah, and we do have Compline now, digitally, right?
Great. Oh, great.
Yeah, at 8 o'clock, the first and third Sundays.
Right.
Nice. And so that's a piece of what we do.
Evensong we have to figure out again.
Yeah,
but
and then
But you do a
And
lovely evensong. Yeah, it's very enjoyable. And
a
you have a
very
children's
different
choir, don't you? Don't you
Say
have a
that again?
children's choir? Don't you have a children's choir school or program?
We have a brand program actually last year, and now in COVID, it's still kind of,
It's still going.
it's still going, right? But it has to be digital at this point, right? So that's the other thing. So it's a brand new program of choristers for children, and it uses the Royal School of Church Music curriculum. And Stephen Saltz, who is a long tenure at St. James, is our director of that program under Dr. Chris Gravis, who's our canon for music ministry. And yeah, so that's a great little program, and
It's a wonderful program.
And and we're it's a fledgling thing right now. But if you have any children that would love to be part of that, we would love to invite them, because it's not just for St. John's.
No.
It's for the neighborhood and for the broader community. And
I think
do they get to wear those ruffly things around?
They do.
They do.
They do.
Oh my God, that makes it all worthwhile. Yeah, so that's the music is beautiful, and I know that wasn't Chris Gravis, wasn't he connected to St. James?
Well, mostly because of his lovely wife, who has been a singer in your choir, Andrea Zamarodian, for a long time.
Wonderful. Yeah. So wonderful. We are so blessed when it comes to this music community in our churches. Do you know if there are any other choir schools for children in our diocese? I've never heard of another one.
Yeah, I mean, we call it a choral academy because it's mostly about music education as well as performance.
Right.
So it's not an actual school per se, right?
No, I know.
But yes, I think there are some children's choirs that have a similar thing.
All Saints Pasadena.
All Saints Pasadena is one in particular. Yeah. And in fact, during Advent, there's a few of those choirs are going to get together again over Zoom and do a mass children's choir event for
Christmas.
Advent.
Yeah.
Wow, that's wonderful. That's something to look forward to. So we've talked about what it means to be a cathedral, and also what it means to be a parish church. We've talked about what it means to be co-deans and this whole model of shared leadership. And we talked about your gas station that might someday turn into this village that you're creating, if that all goes through. Yeah, and also we just talked about the exquisite beauty of the church and this charism of hospitality. We've experienced it as your visitors from St. James, and look forward to many more good times in that amazing place of yours. So I have, believe it or not, I've worked through my questions. Is there anything else that either of you would like to say to us tonight as we close?
Well, the people of St. James are always welcome at St. John's. I feel like we are siblings in the truest sense.
Right.
And
I do too.
Yeah. And remember that our patron names were brothers. So there you go. And James and John were apostles, right?
And you've been, and I just want to say that on a personal note, you've both been you were so brotherly to me from the moment I arrived. You reached out to me and welcomed me, and I really appreciated it. And I just value you both so much. Thank you so much for being with us tonight, and for being our deans here in the Diocese of Los Angeles.
Well, thank you for inviting us.
Thank you. We're honored to have been invited.
All right. Well, goodbye, everyone. Thank you for tuning in, and blessings until next week. Bye.
Bye-bye.